refer somebody to, if it's an out-of-town place, to an investigator in another area, somebody whose work I respect. But in terms of the places where it's feasible for me to look into a case, I have two very separate criteria that I use, and so it yields two different kinds of cases. The first, of course, is the real emergency case, when somebody is in really serious trouble, and that's emotional trouble, and where they are at their wits' end, and this can happen very frequently. And my position there is very much like, as I put it, as a matter of triage, as if I'm in the emergency room and whoever is bleeding the worst gets the first attention. And so I will deal with a person in terms of wanting to respond to their phone call or letter or speak to them directly. I'll do that very quickly if the person seems in serious trouble. I'll give you an example of this. A woman contacted me from out of town, and she had a very serious problem with a 3-year-old daughter. This woman herself feels she's had abduction experiences. She was on the telephone, very cogent and clear. Her daughter was going through all the patterns, was afraid to sleep in her room, panicked about the men with the big black eyes that were coming through the wall into the room and taking her out at night, and there were marks on her. And even from the age of 2, she was afraid of the little doctors, as she called them, and so forth. They're really serious problems. But what had happened is the little girl the fear was getting crippling. The mother said that the child would not stay more than 10 feet away from her. If she went from one room, the daughter would follow her, and the daughter would not sleep anymore in her room. She slept with her parents. But beyond that, she was going through this game, which she said was having a baby. And she would, at 3 years old, take off her clothes and lie down, and she had a little doll, and she, in effect, opened her legs and pretended she was giving birth as if she understood what was going on, and she cried out and so forth, in such a way that the mother felt she had actually seen someone giving birth, which, in terms of what could go on in UFOs, I would not be totally surprised about. But at any rate, they took the child to a counselor, and the counselor was suggesting that she go to a child psychiatrist because the problems were very serious. But at the crucial point, which is what led the woman to contact me, the little girl told her mother that she knew what a penis was and what it looked like. And this is a 3-year-old, and gave a apparently fairly clear description. And the mother asked where she had seen this, and she seemed a little flustered, but finally said, "Daddy." Well, you can imagine what happened there in terms of the shock. But the woman told me that there was absolutely no chance that her husband had anything to do sexually with the little girl. She said the father is very rarely ever with the little girl alone. She said, "I'm with her all the time, unfortunately." And she said, "I have been told to take her to a psychiatrist, but now I'm afraid, what if I go into a psychiatrist and take her in and she tells this to the psychiatrist?" She said, "I don't want my husband to be taken to prison here. Who is going to report what?" Now, here I was in the middle of trying to help this family on what was really an emergency basis. So this is type 1 emergency case. Incidentally, just to give you a suggestion of what I did, of course, I located a support group and some very, very skilled people in the area of the part of the country where this family lives, and asked her to contact them. And as a small suggestion, I asked her to make a drawing, the mother, on a big piece of paper of various just simple silhouettes that might include a penis in silhouette, just a simple shape, but also a long, thin instrument that could be an instrument, and various other shapes that were not right, and asked the little girl what the penis that she saw looked like, to see if, in fact, this was some kind of human organ that she'd seen, or some kind of instrument, or something else. We have no idea what she saw. I also asked her to draw roughly 3 or 4 little babies on another big piece of paper, and starting with a very, very small baby, perhaps 4 inches long, and then going up to a newborn, and ask the child, when babies are born, how big are they, and try to see what the child would point to, see if she has some sense of a normalized birth, or whether we're dealing with some sort of, hybrid baby, which people have described sometimes as being quite small, quite tiny. So I gave her those 2 little experiments to do, with, again, the suggestion that she not bring this up to the child. She had them ready, these drawings, and then when the child brings the subject up, she can then pull them out and have her deal with them. I'm only giving you this example of length here to show what happens when you have someone really extremely frightened, and that's because of the social situation and because of this child's building anxiety. Now, the second kind of case, another protocol followed, is if I feel the case has potentially a great deal of new information or strong evidence behind it, then I gravitate to that case right away. And I would say that the 2 cases I mentioned earlier when I was talking about witness cases are that sort of case. I mean, each one of them has the potential of a great deal of evidence, a number of witnesses, etc., which make me feel that I would be willing to drive down to that part of Pennsylvania and spend a day or 2 there, rounding up witnesses and talking to them. If somebody feels that there's an implant and they have a scar in some part in their nostril or something of that sort, which is actually the way I became initially involved with Linda Cortila, that sort of thing also attracts my attention. But I have other reasons too. For instance, in dealing with the woman I described earlier, who had been abducted in Tokyo, I'd never done extensive work with a Japanese person whose experiences had happened there. I've recently worked with 2 Israelis who did not know one another, but whose abductions took place in Israel, and so I'm very interested in gathering data in foreign abductions and seeing if the patterns are the same. Those are the sort of information gathering and evidence gathering protocols, really, that I would follow. That those cases have those potentials. Now, how I proceed in a case, the real nitty-gritty protocols that I follow in working with somebody, that's another issue, and I can just outline that very quickly. If somebody writes to me, let's say, and the letter is in the area where I can, where they can potentially come to New York and visit and do sessions. Let's say they're within 200 miles from here. I will, and the case is interesting for one of the 2 reasons I've just stated. I will call the person, and we have an interview over the phone, and that might take a half an hour, where I just try to find out as much as I can about the person's real-life circumstances, their job, whether they're involved in a relationship, are their parents living, do they have a family? Family members, counselors, whatever. Then I go into detail, finding out everything I can about their childhood, their dream life, issues as to whether or not when they were little there was ever a problem where they seemed to be lost or mixed up about time. Sometimes people have these experiences and never even think about it until I ask the question, which is incidentally what turned up with this Japanese woman. It was only when I asked the question, when you were little, did you ever have any kind of time when you were lost or time was mixed up that sort of stays in your memory as a little odd or unusual? And she said, well, yes, and told me this particular incident. But I asked about physical marks that might be unusual in the body. I asked about anything involving children as the person fathered or given birth to a child. issues of how the person faces going into medical circumstances, going to see the dentist or the doctor, pointing out that nobody likes to do that, but that's something that you feel comfortable enough with, and so forth. I do as long and as detailed an interview as I possibly can. And of course, always reassuring the person, and I'm not asking anything because I doubt their account. I wouldn't be seeing them if I, in an a priori way, doubt their account. I've already decided by the phone conversation that everything seems solid enough. And then, if all goes well, and I give them information, some material about hypnosis, if we want to look into one of these incidents by hypnotic regression session, then that's scheduled for another time. And that's the way the procedures begin. So those are generally the protocols I follow on this. I hope that answers the question. It's kind of a lengthy answer. It's a little hard that they have the possibility of seeing the future. Right. Well, now I have heard from a number of abductees the statement that they feel upon occasion they have known something that was going to happen. Personally, they don't know how they do it. An accident, whatever. And of course, you get that from people who are not abductees too. I never know exactly how to handle that. But the interesting thing is, when people are abducted and are shown images, which they frequently are, of the Earth exploding or being swept by fire or devastated, or images of great destruction of one sort or another, atomic warfare, or one woman I remember was shown a huge flood sort of covering Noah-like flood covering her. The individual, the abductee, tends to think that this is predictive, that they're being shown the future. But of course, there's no reason to think that is why they're being shown this. It may be very interesting to the UFO occupants to see exactly what our attitudes towards our own home planet really are. And by showing the home planet that we live on in some sort of dire straits and all kinds of horrible things happening to it, obviously if those images are graphic enough, and they very often seem to be, the abductee is obviously registering emotion. And I suppose if the UFO occupants are able to read minds and read the emotions somehow coming from this, what they have then done is created a giant and very powerful projected test to show an image and to see how we react to it. We don't know that that's what's going on. But the one thing we do know absolutely for sure is that there have been many, many abductees who were absolutely dead certain that the aliens had told them at a certain date something was going to happen. I know my friend Charlie Hickson from the Pascagoula abduction in 1973. Charlie spoke for years on the subject that the aliens had told him that in 1993 there would be the mass landing, the world would change on that date, and that we were to prepare ourselves and so forth. And he was so absolutely consumed with this that he spoke again and again and again. And of course, here we are in 1998. Many people, many abductees, feel they have been told things that turn out not to happen or not to come true. Is that just some kind of mind game? Are they doing something almost like an experiment? They put out something for us to respond to and then see what we do, or what the depth of the emotional response is. We don't know. But I myself really have no answer that's any better than that to whether or not the UFO occupants have any idea of future events that they're not causing. Any other questions? Hello there? I'm sorry, you're going to have to speak a little less. What's the name again? No, I don't know the name. I would doubt that any letters are coming from Andromeda, just to start with. Although that's a nice name for a newsletter. Uh, okay. Uh-huh. Right. That's a very, very good question, and it's of course something that I try to be very conservative about. If I feel the person is is unstable, if in my interviews with them I see any signs of that, and uh, there would seem to be the possibility of doing harm rather than helping in the short term, I obviously stay away from those circumstances from working with that person. I should also point out that I have a couple of therapists who I can send people to, and I give them the names and addresses to the FFP who's approaching me. Uh, so if they need to talk to somebody, and I often point out, even to imagine that these things are going on in your life, that's a heavy thing to deal with, and it might be helpful to just talk to somebody to help you find ways of integrating these experiences into the rest of your life. Now, the point is, of course, that no one can be absolutely dead certain ever that someone you work with is not going to have adverse reactions to what you do. And of course, if you let that idea that it is possible beyond all of your most careful sort of analyses of the interviews with the person and so forth, if that if you're afraid that something's going to happen in any case, or many cases, it can kind of paralyze the idea of wanting to do this. After all, when I work with somebody, I do it free. This is my own life I'm giving away. There's no money that comes to me. That of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I've worked with, it's now probably approaching 640 people, something like that, one-on-one. There are only a very few who I'm going to be able to use that material in any way that could in any remote way come back to pay off any of the time. If I write a book, I've written 3 books in 21 years. It's not exactly a going business. I mean, I'm giving my life away. So the last thing I want to do is to give my life away and then create some kind of harm. So I'm very cautious about that. But still, there have been cases. I've been working with a young man recently who has had a great deal of therapy, is under therapy now, is suffering from a severe anxiety attacks. And I felt that rather than being very, very conservative in that case and refuse to do anything with him, I felt that if I could lessen the anxiety by his exploring these experiences in greater depth, he remembers, like many FFPs, pieces of the infection experience, but not the whole thing. And he's desperate to find out just what's going on. With the fact that his therapist agreed to this, I've started the process of hypnosis with him, and I think it's been very helpful. The really conservative, I suppose, the tack to take, I'm going to sort of want to not run any personal risks, but have just said no to this man. But we didn't have anything to do it. It doesn't mean that we're going to not make mistakes. I think mistakes will be made. I've been at this for many, many years, and I think just in balance, looking back, the amount of help that I've been able to give to people vastly outweighs anything that I might look at as something negative that resulted. But again, it's a gamble. But life requires taking gambles, and there are many surgeons who will look at at someone advanced in age who needs an operation and think, well, maybe the cancer will